Hey there, everybody. It's Steve Van Tassel coming at you for Dynasty Owner. And we are continuing my series on tiers right now. We are going to talk about, we've already done quarterbacks. We've already done running backs. Next, we're going to do tight ends. And the tight end tiers, they're more similar to the quarterback tiers than the running back tiers, because in Dynasty Owner, you're playing fewer tight ends than you are running backs. You're playing 24 at the minimum, because you've got to everybody has to have a starting tight end and a bench tight end. And you could use a tight end in your starting flex position, but not a lot of people are going to do that unless you've got a couple of the top tight ends out there. So in general, you can probably play 24 just like you do at quarterback. But unlike the quarterback tiers, there's something different about the tight end position. It's very unique. There's a top tier of, there used to be 3 and now there's 4 guys out there who pretty much everybody wants. They make quite a bit of money, but they're going to they're expected to outproduce everybody else. 3 of them have been doing it for the past couple of years. The 4th was Kyle Pitts, who was just drafted and is expected to slide right in there. And they're a step above everybody else. In contrast, at the quarterback position, we have, like, at the top tier, we had 5 young ones. If you missed my quarterback tier article or video, go back on YouTube or on the podcast and check it out, or read the article. But like I said, the tight ends are going to be a little similar to the quarterbacks. We've got a few more tiers than we did for quarterbacks, but less than we did for tight ends. So without further ado, we are going to talk about these tiers. Here we go. So as we said, how many tight owner tiers do we have? Dynasty Owner tight end tiers. Well, the first one is tier 1A, and it's just titled the best tight end with the lowest salary. It's a tier for Darren Waller, basically. Waller, he's one of the top ones out there. He's going to score a lot of points, and he's got a lower salary than the other 2 who are out there, Travis Kelce and George Kittle. He's about $7 million less than Kelce, a little under $7 million less than Kelce, and he's a little over $7.5 million less than Kittle. And they're projected to score the same number of points. Waller did it last year. He did it the year before. In 2019, he was tight end 4 in Dynasty Owner. Last year, he was tight end 2. And you're going to get that for $7.45 million. And so that's great. And that's why I have him just at tier 1A. To contrast it with tier 1B, who are the best tight ends with higher salaries, and that's Kelce and Kittle. Both of them have higher salaries than Waller. Kelce's is $14.3 million, Kittle's is $15 million, and both of them have a little longer length contract as well. Both of them have 5-year contracts, whereas Waller's contract is only for 3 years. Another reason why I kind of like Waller a little bit better. So those guys are tier 1B. Then we have the last of our top tight ends is in tier 2, and it's rookie first round draft pick tight ends. It could have said tight end because it's just the Kyle Pitts tier. I mean, I could have just called it the Kyle Pitts tier, and I probably should have. I am a little different here. I think that because Pitts hasn't done it yet, whereas the other 3 guys have played in the NFL and produced, I'm going to put Pitts a tick lower than those guys. He's in his own tier. He's tier 2, the third one of our tiers, even though it's tier 2. And that's the Pitts tier. Then we've got tier 3, which are young tight ends with 1 year left on their contract. And this is where we start to get into a gap. There's quite a big gap between tier 2 and tier 3. And that's because these guys are they're projected to do about the same as Pitts, but they're not expected to be as good. And all of them have 1 year left on their contract. And we got Mark Andrews, Dallas Goedert, and Mike Gesicki. All of them don't make a lot of money right now. They're projected 2021 Dynasty dollars per point value. The last column here, they're all under $10,000 per year. So they're great for the 2021. The downside of them is that they're all projected to be making $10 million or more next year. So that's going to make them cost prohibitive next year and drop them several tiers and make them several $million more and more difficult to fit into under your salary cap. Tier 4 is a two-man tier, and it's former Iowa Hawkeye first-round draft picks. Some of you might be thinking, well, what about George Kittle? Well, he did go to Iowa, but he was not a first-round draft pick. The 49ers took him in the 5th round. But these two guys were both first-round picks in the 2019 NFL draft. Noah Fant was taken with the 20th pick by Denver, and TJ Hawkinson was taken with the 8th pick by Detroit. And that's the difference between these two guys. The difference between the 8th pick and the 20th pick in that draft was about $1.8 million, and that makes Fant a better value. They're projected to get the same number of points, basically 204.5 versus 207.5. But because Fant is $1.8 million less, he's a better value. But pick which one you like. I mean, if you like Hawkinson better, you should probably take him over Fant. But it's a tough call for a lot of people. And in regular Dynasty and redraft, but in Dynasty owner, maybe Fant moves up just a little bit ahead of Hawkinson because of that lower salary. Now we've got sort of another break in our tiers. Tier 4 to Tier 5 there's a gap. I mean, you're talking about Tier 4, those are guys who have done it for the past 2 years. And then you've got Tier 5 who are kind of young tight ends with affordable salaries and potential. And it's not to say that none of them will not move into being as good as guys in the previous tier. It's just that none of them have really sort of done it yet. This is our first tier, Tier 5, where we've got more than 3 guys in the tier. This one we've got 7, and they're all young. But there's quite a drop in terms of the number of Dynasty owner fantasy points. The highest scorer here listed is projected is Irv Smith at 177 points, and that's almost 100 less than Waller, Kelsey, and Kittle. But the good news for people who thinking about Tier 5 guys is all of them have affordable salaries and potential. And the reason why I say potential, and this range of how many years are left on contracts for these guys, is that 2 of them are rookies, Brevin Jordan from the Texans and Pat Freiermuth with the Steelers. But none of the rest of them here have scored more than 100 Dynasty owner fantasy points in a season. And all of the veterans, at least have played at least 1 year, except for Albert O, I'm not going to try to pronounce his last name, are projected to get over 100 points. And in fact, all of them who played last year are projected to get more than 40 Dynasty owner fantasy points more than they did last year. So even Albert O is supposed to get more than that. So they've got potential. None of them have actually done it. If they work out great, you'll be very helpful for your Dynasty owner team. But they're in Tier 5 and a tick lower just because they scream the word potential. So next we've got Tier 6A, which is some $3 million starting tight ends with 1 year left on their contract. And I call them low end at the beginning because, they're guys who there's potentially something that's going to prevents them from being in a higher tier. They've all got those $3 million salaries, all for 1 year. Their values are pretty similar. But the 3 of those guys are Logan Thomas, Hayden Hurst, and Robert Tonyan. And all of them have something that prevents them from going a little higher. Thomas is the oldest here. He's 30. Tonyan's got that, who knows, Green Bay Packers quarterback situation. We'll find out soon. And Hayden Hurst pretty much had the guy who's going to replace him drafted in Kyle Pitts ahead of him for last year. So all 3 of those guys, but they all got $3 million salaries. You only have them for 1 year on your books. So, and they could produce quite a lot of points for you for the 1 year. So then the next tier is Tier 6B. We've got some more $3 million starting tight ends. And all these guys, they've got the label of having potential. And the reason why they get separated is because all of them had career years last year, their best year, their entire career. They're short careers, but their entire career. But all of them are projected to exceed that career year in their 2021 projections. They all make $3 million a year. Only one of them, Dan Arnold, here has 2 years left on his contract. So they're all just, I feel like they all have potential, but they haven't proven it. The guys in the previous tier 6A, Thomas, Tonyan, and Hurst all had great years last year. They were all in the top 10, I believe, all in the top 10 in tight end scoring in Dynasty Owner last year. None of these guys they're projected to be better. We'll have to see, but I find them to be just a little bit below the last tier. Now we're moving into tier 7A, which is cheap contract tight ends who need to prove themselves. And it's a list of 5 here. All of them make under $1 million. All of them have a value of under $10,000 for Dynasty dollar per point. But the reason why they need to prove themselves, and the reason why they're in a lower tier despite these cheap salaries, is that none of them are projected as a top 24 scoring tight end in 2021. So basically, they're not a starter or bench player in a normal week for Dynasty Owner. Now, depending on the matchups and injuries and bye weeks, they could be your starter or on your bench, but you're not counting on them to hold down one of those positions week in and week out. All of them are pretty young. All of them could have long careers ahead of them. I mean, even Jordan Akins, who's the oldest one, I think is only 29 of the group. So, and they have cheap contracts, so we don't know what's going to happen next year based on what happens this year. But they distinguish themselves a little bit from these tier 7B, which is more cheap contract tight ends who need to prove themselves. And this is a slightly longer list. We've got 8 guys here. And the difference basically is projected points. The guys on the cheap tier 7A all were projected to have more points, at least 70. Caden Smith was the lowest on that list, and he had 78.6. You'll see the highest one on this list is Will Disley with just under 60, 59.6. As a result, their Dynasty dollar per points are higher, and they just have the lower projections for whatever reason. You could go through each one of them and figure out why. I mean, some of them have other tight ends who were just picked up ahead of them, who just paid money to play ahead of them, presumably. Some are in high volume passing offenses, but they're way down on the list of options there. Jacob Hollister and Drew Sample from Buffalo and Cincinnati come to mind. Others are kind of in crowded tight end rooms. Durham Smith has a lot of tight ends ahead of him, a lot of other pass catchers. Hakeem Butler's got possibly Ertz, Goddard, and Richard Rodgers ahead of him. So while he's cheap, he may not see the field a lot. So, and then Foster Moreau makes the list here. He's the guy who's the biggest wild card. I mean, if I had Darren Waller on a Dynasty Owner team, I'd probably want Foster Moreau as well, just to have that handcuff. Very cheap, $752,000 for 2 years. And if Waller goes down with an injury, hopefully Moreau could move right in. Our next tier is tier 8A. Now we're getting back to guys who make a lot more money. They're expensive but productive veterans on 1-year contracts. And, you see the list. These are familiar faces, familiar guys: Jared Cook, Gerald Everett, Rob Gronkowski, Eric Ebron, Zach Ertz, and Jimmy Graham. Cook makes $4.5 million. That's the lowest. Ertz makes $8.5 million. That's the highest. All of them are going to get you pretty good production. They're all projected to finish in the top 30 tight ends. A couple of them at the bottom, Ebron and Graham, are just outside the top 24. I think Ertz was a little bit outside of it too, but they're right there. They're in the top 30. So you know what you're going to get. They're going to be solid. They're going to be steady, and you're going to pay a lot for them, but you're probably going to get some decent production. And then you've got tier 8B, who are similar guys who are probably going to produce. However, the big difference is this middle column here, which is the number of years on that contract. And that's 3 for Blake Jarwin and for Tyler Higbee. So, I mean, that's the only reason they're in a different category. It's because it's Dynasty Owner. We use salaries, we use contracts, and the first 8A, 1-year contracts. So you can get rid of them next year if they don't produce. you don't have to hang on to them. These guys are going to cost you a little bit more if you need to get rid of them because they don't produce, because they've got a couple of years left on their contract. Then we go to tier 9. Speaking of contracts, we've got $10 million plus salary tight ends. It's a list of 3. It's Austin Hooper, Hunter Henry, and Jonnu Smith. And they're the only other 3 tight ends who make over $10 million a year. All of them have at least 3 years left on their contract. Smith has 4. All of them are going to get you some points. I mean, they're going to be top 20 tight ends. It's just that you're paying over $10 million for them. So that's what happens with free agency in the NFL. They're productive one place, they move somewhere else, and they get a lot of money. We'll see if they're still productive, but unless they start producing like Kelsey or Kittle, they're not nearly as valuable. Tier 10, we have a trio of disappointing 2017 first-round picks. Interestingly, all of them make the same amount. All of them make $6.013 million for 2021. And that's, you got Evan Ingram, OJ Howard, and David Njoku. All of them have not lived up to the hype. All of them are on their 5th-year options. All of them are making that $6.0313 million salary. And you're just taking chances with these guys. You don't know what's going to happen, where they're going to be. They could have a great year and end up signing with the new team in 2020 for more money and maybe be the clear starter. Or they could have a poor season and sign a 1-year deal for next to nothing next year. It's kind of they're in between there, which is why they're down in tier 10. Keep going. We've got tier 11, which are cheap rookie flyers. And there's 2 pages of this list, and you'll just see a lot of young guys here. All rookies. Everybody but Kenny Yoba has a 4-year deal. He has only a 3-year deal because he's the only undrafted rookie free agent on this list. And interestingly, they were all 3rd, 4th, or 5th round picks, as there weren't any tight ends selected in the NFL draft in the 6th or 7th round this year. Don't expect a lot of points from them this year. But at the same point, maybe they move ahead of somebody, the other tight ends on the roster in the next years, and you want to have them on your roster. Keep them on the practice squad this year. They don't make their way into your starting lineup or your bench at all, but they're here for next year. Top of the list is Kenny Yoba from the Jets, all the way down to Trey McKitty and Luke Farrell, who aren't projected to score any points this year. I doubt they're going to get 0, but they're down at the bottom. So interesting list of players. So wouldn't recommend, maybe have a couple of them, see if one pans out, or just take one and stash them at the end of your bench. They're all around $1 million or so. So they're not going to break the bank. We're near the end. Here we've got tier 12, and we've got cheap tight ends drafted recently who didn't pan out as rookies. And it's a list of Packers and Patriots. Dalton Keene, Devin Assisi, Jay Sternberg, and Josiah Deguara. All drafted 2nd or 3rd round, I believe. All making around $1 million. Sternberger's a little less because he was drafted a year earlier, but none of them did anything in their rookie year. Sternberger didn't do anything in his rookie year and didn't do anything last year. So you might have them. I'm not sure anybody really wants to draft these guys, but you might have, if you're in a established league, you drafted them last year, maybe you probably kind of got to stick with them. You never know what's going to happen, but I wouldn't be excited about having them. I wouldn't expect them to play. They need to be at best your 4th tight end, so you're not expected to play them all year and see what happens. And then our final tier, just like the quarterbacks, we've got some overpaid veterans who you don't want on your roster. Unlike running backs, where you can find plenty of guys, many of the older veterans are making like $1 million a year or so. These guys are overpaid veterans, and nobody really has them in Dynasty Owner, and you don't want them because Jack Doyle, Cameron Brate, Kyle Rudolph, CJ Uzuma, they all make at least $6 million a year. Doyle makes 7.1, Brate makes 6.8. They're all projected to get under 100 Dynasty Owner fantasy points this year, which makes their value very big and very unworth it for that much money. You could find a lot better player. There's plenty of players we've listed before who are cheaper and will cost you less. So there we go. That's our Dynasty owner tight end tiers. We've got one more set of tiers to go. We've got wide receivers next week. So hopefully you enjoyed it. Please like this video. Please make sure to follow me on Twitter at SteveBT33 and follow Dynasty Owner on Twitter at Dynasty_owner. Make sure to check out the full article if you want to read, if you want to see all the stats and all the details involved here. We just kind of covered the highlights in the video and on the podcast. And make sure to watch the videos and read the articles by Matt the Jerk, Dynasty Jerk, and Jay Pounds at Jay Pounds NFL to get even more information about Dynasty Owner and how to play and how we're different than every other Dynasty and fantasy football league out there. Thanks a lot. Have a great day, and I'll see you next week.